the kingmakers, we are the sovereign people of this land, and the world is watching us here.
Tens of thousands of people gathered in Waitangi Park early this morning in preparation for the final stretch of the march towards New Zealand's Parliament. In a country of 5 million people, this protest is huge. It's one of the most significant in recent history. Demonstrators gathered here in Wellington to take part in a rally protesting against a controversial bill that threatens to overhaul the founding document between the British Crown and Māori people. Police say more than 40,000 people attended the rally. It's an issue that's divided a country known for being a leader when it comes to Indigenous rights.
We will be heard. We will be heard. We're making noise right now and we're coming. Look at everyone. It's beautiful.
We don't believe it needs any tinkering at all. What it has done is it seriously divided Aotearoa New Zealand, and it's a real shame.
It garnered international attention last week when this clip from New Zealand's Parliament went viral. A Māori MP initiating a haka in protest at the bill. Today's gathering is the culmination of a 9-day hikoi, or peaceful march, that started right in the top of the North Island here in New Zealand and ended up here in the capital, Wellington.
We will never ever have to decide who can mess with our rights and our sovereignty as an Indigenous people here in Aotearoa. We are the kingmakers, we are the sovereign people of this land, and the world is watching us here. Not because of the system, not because of the rules, but because we haka and because we have our reo.
Inside Parliament, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said it was a significant day, and he reiterated that this bill wouldn't pass a second reading.
Kia ora, good afternoon everybody. Just want to acknowledge up front that this is a pretty significant day. As you know, our position as a National Party is unchanged. We won't be supporting the bill beyond second reading, and therefore it won't become law.
The man behind this controversial bill is the leader of the ACT Party, David Seymour. I asked him why he was pushing such a controversial bill.
New Zealand for a long time has conceived its founding document, the Treaty of Waitangi, as creating a, quote, partnership between races. There's a long jurisprudence that's built up to justify this, and yet it brings us to a place that's inconsistent with liberal democracy. It says that we are a partnership between two collectives defined by ancestry. As some people like to say, tangata whenua, land people, and tangata tiriti, treaty people, people here by dint of the treaty. And the challenge for that, there's a whole lot of people who live in New Zealand, it's the only country they have, and they're told that their constitutional status is somehow secondary under this conception of the treaty. My Treaty Principles Bill says that the treaty gives all people equal rights. It protects the rights of Māori, of course, but it protects the rights of all people.
You're talking about a treaty that was between British colonisers and Māori who were here before the British, still 20% of the population. Is that not worth protecting?
Well, we are protecting it, but the question is, what does it mean in the modern context? And I would argue the important parts where it says ngā tikanga katoa rite tahi, I always use the Māori version, which says that we all have the same rights and duties. It says that the tino rangatiratanga, or self-determination, the ability to own property and develop your language, your culture and your aspirations, should apply to all New Zealanders. Some people say that means only New Zealanders as at 1840. I say that's a vision for New Zealand in perpetuity.
I mean, you talk about division. You know, people have come to regard themselves, this is something that on social media, as members of an ethnic group instead of New Zealanders. New Zealand itself is a colonial context. You know, the recognition of Māori community who came before that is a key part of who modern New Zealand is.
Well, that's one view. Mine is that New Zealand is a country made up of human beings who have a range of characteristics and hopes and aspirations. I myself, partly whakapapa Māori, partly whakapapa Scottish or English. That's my ancestry. I don't appreciate being put into a box according to someone else's version of history. What my treaty principles bill says that I, like everybody else, whether their ancestors came here 1,000 years ago, like some of mine did, or just got off the plane at Auckland International Airport this morning to begin their journey as New Zealanders, have the same basic rights and dignity as human beings. Culture, language, all flows out of that foundation of equal rights.
I spoke with MP Debbie Ngarewa-Packer about how this issue has stoked racial tensions in the country.
I think what we're seeing is a political party wanting to interfere with the peace and the harmony of us in Aotearoa. We have Te Tiriti, the treaty, which is absolutely unique for Indigenous people. It represents our rights and interests before colonisation, and it also represents the intent to live in harmony. So when we have political interference trying to bring about the division, the disharmony, interfere with legislation, it has absolutely no mandate to interfere with. It was signed between the chiefs of Māori and the Crown. This political party, David Seymour, is neither. So it is an absolute attempt to divide an otherwise really progressive country, and it's really embarrassing for not only us domestically, but us at a global level as well, because we've been always recognised as having great race relations. We have existed as tangata whenua for thousands of years, and as a consequence of colonisation, we now have Māori dying 8 to 10 years earlier than non-Māori. We now frequent some of the worst stats in the health system, in the prison system, educationally. So we have real inequities that happen to us as a consequence of the history of colonisation in Aotearoa. So the advancement that we're doing was to address the inequity. So you can't live equally if we have one people who are the Indigenous people living less than and experiencing worse than a quality of life. And so, the fact that we've been able to address this real slow incremental changes in policy that protect our language, and policy that protects our culture, that enables us to live undisturbed, which is what Te Tiriti promises, is actually not having extra rights. It's actually having the right to be who we are without interruption, to be able to determine our own lives.
Lecturer Carwyn Jones has spent his career working as a Māori legal expert, and he told me why the protest was so significant.
So a hikoi is it's drawing on previous forms of protest marches or previous hikoi. So we've seen some of the most significant moments in these relationships between Māori and government attention be brought to bear through the use of a hikoi. So it's a march which is coming down from the top of the North Island to Wellington. People are also coming from the bottom of the South Island, coming up to Wellington, and stopping off at different places along the way, which give opportunities to talk about the issues. And one of the things that people have talked about with this hikoi is that it's not just kind of in protest or against the Treaty Principles Bill, but it's actually intended to provide an opportunity for people to have some conversations about the treaty and to build some ideas around how we move forward. The essential idea in the treaty is that it creates a space for the British government to exercise some form of authority here. And what was talked about and what the Māori text of the treaty refers to is a form of government authority over the British settlers who were here at the time. So the Crown would have authority over its own people. But we see that Māori authority is guaranteed to remain, because in the second article of the treaty talks about a guarantee of tino rangatiratanga, which is absolute chiefly authority. So you have set up this idea of these two spheres of authority coexisting here in Aotearoa. The Treaty of Waitangi is an agreement between Māori communities and government, and so it sets up that particular relationship, but it also provides a really useful model for thinking about ways of accommodating difference and diversity, ways of drawing on having different voices involved in decision making, and those are models which aren't just applicable to Māori, but can be expanded to all kinds of other different communities of interest in Aotearoa. And I think if you're unwilling to take that step of engaging with Māori, then I think it's very unlikely that as a government you'd be willing to engage or think about how to accommodate difference in other kinds of circumstances.